It's worked so far, but we're not out yet.
I wanna know what you're thinking. There are some things you can't hide. I wanna know what you're feeling. Tell me what's on your mind.
Pure energy. Pure energy.
Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to the first live episode of Enterprising Individuals.
Woo!
Thank you. The Star Trek discussion podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about the series, characters, and stories of the Star Trek universe. I'm your host, Caliban, and I, to this day, cannot eat a slice of apple without saying, I don't like to lose. It really freaks out the people at Whole Foods, I'll tell you that much. I'm joined on this special episode by a panel of distinguished guests. First up to my right, he's an author and three-time winner of the Strange New Worlds writing competition. He's written many novels and short stories set in the Star Trek universe. There they are. The most recent being the original series novel, The Shocks of Adversity. There it is. Doing a great visual thing here, too, for our podcast. He's also a former Enterprising Individuals guest, where he appeared on our episode about the Star Trek animated series episode Yesteryear. Please welcome William Leisner.
Thank you.
Next up, she is a science fiction and fantasy writer of the Dead Rivers and Elania's Song series, and she's the author of the Locus and Hugo Award-winning short story, Cat Pictures, Please, which will be released as a full-length YA novella in the near future. She's also a political blogger in the Twin Cities, and she's a CONvergence 2017 Guest of Honor. Meet Naomi Kritzer.
Hello.
He's the author of The Ark and Trident's Forge, and his new book, Children of the Divide, the third entry in the Children of a Dead Earth series, will be out August 1st. He's also a stand-up comedian and a political blogger and contributor to TheHill.com. Ask him about his Mustang. It's Patrick Tomlinson. And last but not least, he's an illustrator and a comic artist who has worked for Marvel, DC, Image, Malibu Comics, and more. He was the regular series artist on the Young Justice comic book, as well as providing art for the Batman Strikes, Justice League Adventures, and Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, in addition to working on properties such as Kolchak, Reanimator, Gargoyles, and his most recent work on the Titan Comics Doctor Who, The Third Doctor series. He's the Chief Creative Officer and the creator of CONvergence mascots Connie, Mark II, and Professor Max, and has served on the CONvergence Board of Directors. Please say hello to Christopher Jones.
Ooh. I'm exhausted from listening to my own bio.
Anything? Yeah, we'll do the rest on the second show. Welcome all of you to the show. You're all granted permission to come aboard. Tonight we'll be talking about what I would term a modern classic, although in the 35 years since its release, it's only grown in the public's estimation. It's a film that defined what audiences expected from their space science fiction, and one that continues to shape and affect the world of Star Trek today. It's also probably guilty of making the literary illusion a popular choice when you're writing a villain's dialogue. We usually cover television episodes on the podcast, but for a big convention like CONvergence, we need a bigger subject. And that's why we're talking about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, tonight. And we'll get to that a little later in the show. Usually at this point on the episode, I ask my guests about their backstory, how they first became a Star Trek fan. But tonight we get to hear several backstories. Let's start with Bill, who's been on the show previously. When we had talked before, you had said that you were a fan of the animated series and the original series when you were growing up.
Right.
And you watched that when you were a kid, Saturday mornings? Or?
Right, yeah. Saturday morning I remember that the original series was 7 o'clock on Channel 10 every Saturday as I was growing up. And that was appointment television for me when I was
Sure.
a little one.
How did that lead to you writing books for Star Trek?
I started to seriously consider writing in college. I was a television production major and got into script writing through that. And at that time, Next Generation was on the air, and they were the only series that had an open script policy where you didn't need an agent to submit a script. So I started writing spec scripts. I did a spec script for Deep Space Nine, sent that in, and that got me an invitation to come out to Los Angeles and pitch them other story ideas. Nothing quite came of that. I tried a couple of times pitching stories. And then I decided to start doing my Star Trek story ideas in prose form. Around that time, Pocket Books started up their Strange New Worlds writing competition for amateur writers. Entered that, and as you mentioned up at the top of the show, I managed to win that contest a couple of times. Mm-hmm. And after that, I was invited to pitch some novels, and the rest is history.
The rest is future history, yeah.
Yes.
Do you remember the first time you saw The Wrath of Khan?
I actually do not, because it was not in the theater.
Right.
It had to have been on VHS.
Sure, right.
Anybody here who does not know what a VHS is?
Well, yeah, we should cover all the basics before we move forward. Naomi, how about you?
So I have some very dim memories of watching the animated series when I was very, very young. But I didn't start watching Star Trek regularly until I was in middle school, at which point my family had finally belatedly gotten a VCR, and I could set it and record the reruns, which at the time were aired at like midnight in my area.
Right.
So I would tape them and then watch them the next day. I remember being incredibly excited when The Next Generation started airing.
Right.
I was ecstatic. I loved the fact that it was now where no one has gone before instead of no man.
Yeah.
I really liked the character of Wesley because I was in the precise demographic of teenagers who were too smart for their own good, for whom
Sure,
was
right.
going to be my awesome character instead.
That's
of
who
an
that
annoying
character was for. Okay, I see.
Yeah, he was really for me. My best friend and I both watched the show and then would talk about it by phone immediately afterwards. I don't remember when I first watched The Wrath of Khan. It must have been on VCR.
Sure.
It was probably during one of my middle school summers when my best friend May and I would take our bikes and ride down to the local video rental store every afternoon and return the tape we had rented yesterday and rent a new tape and bring it home and then watch it. And we watched tons and tons of movies that summer, including a bunch of James Bond movies and probably all the Star Trek movies that were out at that point,
Sure.
Which were the first three. The first one I actually saw in the theaters was number 4.
Okay,
So.
sure. Pat?
I started watching Star Trek when I was 9 years old, and I was sick as hell. I was staying home from school because I had fever, flu, the whole 9 yards, and it was so bad I couldn't sleep. And I snuck out of my bedroom because I was just I was feverish, couldn't get to bed, sweats, the whole thing. And my dad had fallen asleep on the couch, so the TV was still on, and I didn't have anything to do.
Sure.
And on our little, so it's like 1989, our little black and white TV in our living room on Channel 3 out of Madison, Star Trek was on at midnight. Same sort of thing.
I grew up in Madison, so.
Oh, did you? Okay, well, we watched, we probably saw the same. Anyway, so, Channel 3 midnight episodes of Star Trek, the original series, and which was already old by that time.
Right.
And that happened 2 nights in a row, and so I was watching it as so many people did back in the '60s on black and white TV. Mm-hmm. And the first episode of Star Trek I ever saw was, I remember it distinctly, was Spock's brain, and that's how I got started. And I was like, "This is kind of cool, right?" And then the second one was Balance of Terror, so they were showing them completely out of order.
Sure,
but whatever. I was absolutely hooked.
Sure,
and by that time. Next Gen was already a couple of seasons in. Mm-hmm. Didn't know that at the time, and then found out that was an ongoing thing, and watched Next Gen every week, all the way through.
Yeah,
probably the first time I saw and seen every episode of everything and every movie ever since. One of the few people who likes Enterprise and will defend it because that was a great series, and a lot of you are missing a lot of great, not only characterizations but incredible ship designs and and great stories, and especially by the time you get to the 4th season, that was just fan candy all the way through that thing.
Sure.
Anyway, but the first time I saw Star Trek, Wrath of Khan, was my dad before we went to see Star Trek 6 in the theater. Got the box set of everything that was out on VHS up to that point, and we just consumed it.
Nice.
And Star Trek 2 really stuck out for me, just like it did for almost everybody.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is the third Trek panel I've been on at the con so far, and the third mention of Spock's brain. So we're on to something. Illuminati confirmed, I think. Chris,
How
what
you
about
get
you?
hooked. It's just
right.
So it's like candy. That one.
Spock's brain. No,
That's for it.
I grew up watching Star Trek in reruns in spite of living in southern Minnesota and not having access to the Midnight Madison feed. But yeah, so I don't really remember my introduction to it. I know I loved it and watched it at every opportunity and just really was invested in that universe and the technology and the ships and all of that. I have a clearer recollection in my mind of first seeing the trailer for the first Star Trek movie more than I have a recollection of seeing either of the first two movies in the theater, although I'm sure I did. But the point at which Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan really got burned into my brain was actually after I graduated from high school and
you cheated on the Kobayashi Maru test.
Yes.
Okay.
No. I was at art school in Chicago and was hanging out with a friend of mine in the dorm, and he had a laser disc player.
Nice.
Not a. What was the one that was the? It was like a record in a sleeve, actually.
Oh yeah,
Laser disc.
Video disc player.
Video disc.
He had a video disc player and had a video disc copy of The Wrath of Khan.
I watched
And
Excalibur on one of those things.
The number of times
it was terrible.
I can't count the number of times we watched Wrath of Khan. So there was these days are long gone, but there were days where I could just about recite the movie from start to finish. But yeah, I love it to bits, and I mean it's such a great movie on so many levels. But I mean, I would argue that without getting ahead of ourselves, that the scene where Kirk goes to speak to Spock about needing the ship to go on a mission, in that one scene they perfectly encapsulate the entire relationship between Kirk and Spock in a few lines of iconic, almost poetic dialogue, and you just can't top that. So yeah, that's my love for Wrath of Khan.
I have to ask, the video disc version, was it like a director's cut, or did it have the extra TV scenes?
No, it was the theatrical cut, and because of the technology, halfway through the movie, you actually had to take the disc out and flip it and put it back in.
It was an analog system. It was was literally if you guys aren't familiar with video disc, because they only made it for 3 months or something. It was like a big 3-inch floppy disk almost,
pretty much,
because it came in its own plastic sleeve, and inside of it was an just like an old 45 or 78 record.
Okay,
and it played like that, except it was both audio and video feed.
And you never handled it. You basically put the
you couldn't touch
sleeve
it.
like
Yeah.
a cassette into the machine
Yeah.
and pulled it out, leaving the readable part of it in the machine. So yeah, it was a weird contraption, but yeah, it allowed us to watch Wrath of Khan, John Carpenter's The Thing, and a few other movies far more times than was probably healthy.
Just out of curiosity, does everybody have a favorite Star Trek film? It doesn't have to be Wrath of Khan.
It is though.
Okay,
Boy,
Into Darkness.
yes, Into Darkness. Honestly, I love Into Darkness. I think it's a fucking spectacular film, and I think people hate it for all the wrong reasons. But of the original series films, probably Star Trek VI. I think it has the best. I think it has the best, most internally cohesive plot. I think that its characterizations and character interactions are some of the best of that franchise, and I think that it does a real service to all of those characters in the way that they sent them off.
I don't disagree. Sorry, Naomi, just one sec. But I did hear a complaint earlier today that it turns our heroes into old space racists.
Yeah, that happens to everybody.
I think that's part of the plot, but yeah, okay. Naomi?
Can I say Galaxy Quest?
Yes, you may say Galaxy Quest.
And thank you for saying Galaxy Quest.
One thing, as though they didn't hate the Klingons the entire
No,
time.
they
all right,
absolutely
just
did.
they were all
Yeah.
all right. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, and First Contact is the one that I enjoy the most.
Okay, sure. The Borg are always good for a laugh or an assimilation. Usually at this point in the show, I ask the guest why they chose this particular episode, but I chose this in a fit of captain's prerogative because, as you know, Wrath of Khan recently celebrated its 35th anniversary. Here's some boring facts about the film. It was originally released on June 4th, 1982. It had a budget of $11 million, which is way less than the $46 million budget of the motion picture. It went on to make $79 million in its initial release, making it the fifth most successful Trek film, adjusted for inflation, behind Star Trek Into Darkness, Star Trek IV, Star Trek the Motion Picture, and 2009's Star Trek. And just out of curiosity and apropos of nothing except what I just said, what do you guys think about the current slate of films, the new Trek films?
Love them.
Love them.
Love them.
Don't care for them.
Don't care.
I liked the first one, but I haven't seen Into Darkness. I just never got around to it. I'm sorry.
This is
My feelings are really mixed. Actually, the most recent one is my favorite of the three.
okay.
I mean, we could do another whole panel just on that. But there's definitely things I like about them. There's things I have some quibbles with, but I enjoy them.
I just need to say the first 10 minutes of Star Trek Into Darkness is the single best episode of the original series ever put on film.
Okay.
Go back, and if you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. It is 60 minutes, 42 minutes or whatever an episode is, condensed down into 10.
This is where they're running from the natives. And
when they're running from the natives and the volcano's
volcano.
about to blow, and all of a
Right.
sudden they've got this, they've got an ethical dilemma that they have to overcome, and Spock doesn't want to go along with the plan, and of course Kirk's like, "Fuck Spock, we're going to do what,"
Right.
and he's like, "We're going to save him instead," So there's the whole Prime Directive thing thrown in. It is the entire original series. Just crammed
The length
down
of an
in-
Adult
it's-
Swim episode,
It's
yeah.
awesome. It's
Right.
just awesome.
Okay, I can see that. Jack Sowards receives the screenplay credit in the film. He and Harv Bennett produced. He's the producer. They wrote the story. But the real story of the script is much more complicated. It was essentially written by Nicholas Meyer, the director of the film, based on several different drafts by Sowards, Bennett, famed sci-fi writer Theodore Sturgeon, and Samuel A. Peoples contributed as well. Nick Meyer directed it. He was a novelist and screenwriter. He adapted his own Sherlock Holmes novel, The 7% Solution, into a screenplay. He made his directing debut in 1979, directing his own script for Time After Time, which was the H.G. Wells Jack the Ripper movie. And there's two specific dates given for the action of the film. The stardate 8130.3 is said during the training simulator sequence. And of course, the opening title card helpfully says, in the 23rd century. So that's where we're at. Crew, or panel. As always at this part in the show, your assignment, if you can, is to give us a 25-word synopsis of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. But as a Starfleet crew, you must always work together as a team with no interpersonal conflicts, because this is the 23rd century, of course. Therefore, you must create a 25-word synopsis, one word at a time, starting here with Bill. You each get 6 words in sequence. I'll provide the last word. May God have mercy on your souls.
The.
Past.
Ricardo.
So far, so good.
Let me be clear. The past Ricardo
Yes.
character.
Returns.
2.
Revenging.
Ways.
Even semantically correct. Good save. Good save.
And.
Don't overthink it. Go with your gut.
The.
Captain.
Must.
Stop.
Them.
Genesis.
Device.
Exploding.
Spock.
Dies.
New sentence.
Saving.
Enterprise.
From.
Kirk.
So
That was very, very good. It
I
was,
didn't realize we were at the end.
yep. It was your Kobayashi Maru. There was no right answer. It's a test of character. You all
Clearly
passed.
not.
Wrath of Khan, more than any other Trek film, even I think than a lot of the episodes of the show, has come to define the franchise. You've got your humpback whales and your what does God do with a starship and endless pans of the Enterprise in dry dock, but it's continued.
I could have done that for an hour, man. It's the best.
It keeps resonating with fans and even non-fans for years. I know people who have never seen an episode of the show, and this is their favorite movie, and they love the movies. So, as writers and creators, why do you think this has stuck around for so long? Any one of you?
I've got an answer.
Go
if
for
no
it.
one everyone else. I mean, not only is it a very, very well written and directed and acted story, but it takes. I think so. I think it takes
turn.
full advantage of the history of having these actors who have played these characters for at that time approaching 20 years, and you know. Basically has them dealing with things from their past and dealing with getting older and all these things that have huge emotional resonance for fans that have been following it since the original series episode Space Seed.
Yeah, I think that it was the first time that, well, I mean, obviously only the second going for Star Trek as a film franchise, but it was the first time that anything we'd seen with Trek at that point had kind of really shrunk down and become personal. Because during the series where it's like every week we're going out, we're doing some crazy thing. It's like, oh, okay, well, the god Apollo's pissed. Or we'll deal with that. Right. Oh, space hippies. Also, we've got space gangsters, and we've got a Nazi planet, and just what the hell? But you know, and we're working through all of these different things. But we haven't ever and there's always the characters are important and their interactions are important, but they were background to just solving the problem or the monster of the week or whatever. And it remained true in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which was basically just the episode with Nomad just blown up, way bigger. And Wrath of Khan was the first time it was really character driven. Like now, instead of going out and exploring everything, we're shrinking back down, and we're talking about the people on a very personal level and their relationships. I mean, the whole narrative, the whole plot is driven by this interpersonal relationship that gets dredged up from 15 years in the past between Kirk and Khan, and the struggle of intellect and valor that goes on between those two characters. It isn't about the galaxy. It isn't about exploring the galaxy. It's about them in some ways for the first time.
Yeah, you complimented the script for Star Trek VI earlier, but I think that Star Trek II is pretty much on par with that in terms of just its structure. Written by the same guy, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, Nicholas Myers directed Star Trek II, but he actually wrote and directed VI, and it shows.
Yeah.
The thing I would say about Star Trek II is that it is thematically very coherent, in that there are a couple of interlocking themes that are present through the whole movie. You have the theme of the past coming back to haunt somebody, which is in the form of both Khan turning up again and wanting revenge, but also reflected in the existence of David, who I think this is the first he's ever been referenced.
Mentioned,
he shows up in and of course it
and
makes,
Dr. Marcus too. She's never mentioned.
Right, she's
either.
never mentioned before, but it makes perfect sense that Kirk, in his many meanderings past,
of course he's got a son.
David's not the only one.
No, right?
No way.
No, but it's but so you see both sort of this aspect of Kirk's past turning up and this other aspect of Kirk's past turning up in the same movie. So you have that theme reflected in two different ways. You have the theme of self-sacrifice reflected throughout the movie, both in terms of the Kobayashi Maru being an unwinnable situation, and you end up sacrificing your ship to try to save this other ship.
Unless you're Kirk.
Right.
You have the gift, The Tale of Two Cities, which is a book which ends in a character sacrificing himself to save somebody else. You have Spock's death.
No
obviously.
foreshadowing there. No foreshadowing.
Yeah. And you have Khan, who is willing to sacrifice everyone around him on his sort of insane quest to destroy Kirk.
Well, and I liked the mirror also between you had the crew centered obviously with Kirk, but then you also had the forces of creation and destruction.
Yeah.
And the force of creation was in the main female character, Carol Marcus. Mm-hmm. She's literally creating worlds, and she's also a mother character. She mothered Kirk's child, and
Right.
you have then you have Khan, who's a defeated enemy who's come back from the past to destroy absolutely
Right.
everything.
And you have
and he has to manage both of them.
And you have the name of the Genesis device. I mean, you have just literally a reference to creation, and it's this device that can both create and destroy. It can either be great.
Watch out! We can do both.
Yeah, now, watch out.
terraforming tool, or
Here
it
comes
can destroy
Genesis.
everything.
On the top, were you going to say something, Bill? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that part of what makes Star Trek II stand above so many others is today we would call it a hard reboot of the Star Trek universe. It really put aside everything from Star Trek I, other than the fact that Kirk is an admiral. But it reinvented. It brought back the colors to the uniforms.
I love those uniforms too.
Yeah,
They're so-
and that's all.
And it really reinvigorated the franchise after what was not a spectacular story in Star Trek I.
Lukewarmly received. I think a lot of that sort of nautical elements were brought in specifically by Meyer, who wanted to. He saw it as Horatio Hornblower in space, apparently not knowing that was Gene Roddenberry's original inspiration for the thing. So it's a nice bit of convergent evolution there. On the topic of themes, Star Trek by its nature is concerned with didacticism, that there's always something to be taught, something to be learned, which leads to our segment on this show, Captain's Flog, the themes that Star Trek loves to beat into the audience. Can you identify a theme in the film that you would hold out as being either particularly effective or conversely one that's used too much and the franchise could stand to just maybe put down for a while? I would throw out there the idea of the past coming back to haunt you. It's something effective in literature, but it just seems like every single film now after this is something like that.
Yeah, and I was the theme of facing mortality.
Yeah.
Which of course this was really the first one, but they kept hitting that
On
theme
and on.
throughout
Yeah,
the movies.
yeah, really.
Yeah, the theme of getting old. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
one thing.
yeah.
I was going to say that the one that struck me is the theme ever popular in Star Trek of the war has a terrible cost, which they show you by killing nameless extras, which they were
terrible losses.
They very conscientiously had the character they were going to kill introduce himself in an earlier scene.
Right.
But
Hi.
all he got to say is like, "Hi, my name is whatever it was."
Right.
I am
be
I am
extra
a bright-eyed, somewhat small trainee, and so then he's the one whose body Scotty is holding later.
Right.
He never left his post, and I mean,
That's his cousin, that's his little nephew.
Yeah,
or
there's-
Oh, right. In
It is
the
his nephew.
novelization, you get much
In the,
a much
their
more thorough
deleted scenes,
backstory.
yeah.
But yeah, it's
Which I think is like a lot of deleted scenes are cut for a good reason. It's a little heavy-handed in the extended cut because
Yeah.
I think it's enough to know that Scotty cares for the young men under his charge, and
Yes.
this kid is he's an exemplar. He did not leave his post.
right.
you know,
I don't.
and
Yes,
yet-
I think
and
you're
he got his
absolutely
face
right.
blown
You
off.
don't need
Why
to know
bring
that
his body to the
Why bring him to the
bridge?
bridge? Yeah, I know.
It does seem and it's. It's
Scotty
not that I
fixes broken machines. He doesn't know what to do with this.
Right.
It's like, where
He's a
does
little
this-
radiation.
Where does this go?
He's a little confused.
Bones is always up here. I don't know why.
You guys seen Bones around?
He's always on the bridge for some damn
He's not in his
reason.
drinking corner.
Looking for the doctor, thought he might be here, based on these 79 previous adventures of ours.
But it's not that I disagree with this as a theme. It's just that I feel like with Star Trek, it is frequently you know it's like all the many episodes where Kirk is like, oh, they killed one of my men, and it's this red shirt who you just met, right? Like it's hard to take it seriously when it's always.
Do you know how much these things cost?
Yeah.
Yeah, like we're all going to die. We get it. Bring a Mugatu in or something like that. Let's have some fun.
Right. Now that they've killed off all the characters we've never seen before, we know that the real plot's about to start.
Right. Anyone else? Themes in the film.
Themes that
Do
they
you,
overdo.
do you have one? I've got.
If you got one, go ahead.
go for
I'm
it.
still thinking.
I agree with everything that's gone before, but this was also the film that introduced the Star Trek trope of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or
Absolutely.
the one. And
Did that ever come up
obvious-
again? Like in any?
They should have used that.
Yeah. But I think it's very interesting, that like clearly when this was written, they were not imagining, flipping that in the next film. I mean, they may have come up with ideas of a backdoor way of bringing Spock back, but I don't think they had the plot of Star Trek 3 or the dialogue of Star Trek 3 that thoroughly worked out.
No, and
so
in fact,
I think it's really interesting that they set that up as a just a line of dialogue that clearly like resonated and kind of became a catchphrase, and then spent an entire movie completely 180 degrees reversing the point of it.
Yeah, and Meyer himself,
which I liked. But,
well, okay, it's a good movie. Meyer refused to shoot the final scenes of seeing the torpedo coffin on Genesis. That was somebody else that shot that, because he was like, "No, we did it. We killed him. We went through all this trouble to bring Nimoy back because he wanted to be killed. We did it. I told the story. We're done." And so they just got some other producer to shoot those. Let's move.
He got some other producer to shoot those because they knew they were going to try and do Star Trek 3, or.
Yeah, no, the Paramount did, because they were like,
for the theatrical release.
Yeah, they changed
okay.
the script because, like you were saying, it looked like, well, that worked out pretty well. Maybe we could just bring him back. And of course, Nimoy wanted to direct, which he directed the next two films, so they stuck that in.
I read the Wikipedia entry on this.
Okay.
Right after I watched it, and what it said was that Nimoy didn't want to come back for 2, and they talked him into it by saying, "We'll give you an awesome dramatic death scene," and he was like, "Okay, I'm up for it." Then.
Yeah, and it was originally going to be in the first act.
But then he had so much fun making the movie. He was like, "Actually, I would totally do another one of these," and that's why they were like, "Okay, well, we'll figure out a way to bring you back." And
let's move on to our segment, the Starfleet Medal of Honor. This would be a scene, moment, or character that really stands out for you in this film. Multiple nominees are allowed. The best parts, the choice cuts.
If everyone else is still thinking, I mean, I mentioned it earlier. To me, the scene where Kirk goes to Spock's quarters, to say that they need to go on a real mission. The whole the ship is yours scene. That whole scene just breaks me up every time. When it gets to the whole thing of what is it? If I may be so bold, it was a mistake for you to accept promotion. Being a starship captain is your first best destiny. Anything else is a waste of material. Yeah. And Kirk says, "I wouldn't presume to debate you," and Spock says, "That would be wise." Which, that's the whole relationship right there.
There's I'm sure most of you have seen it at some point, but there's a webcomic that it's just it's a one panel thing, and it's like really cartoonized. But there's Spock standing there, and it's just like, "Jim, don't do the thing." And the next frame is just Jim with his hands up in his air going, "I'm doing the thing," and that's the whole. And it's like, yep, that's there it is. But in like I'm gonna skip the entire eulogy scene because there's a few scenes in movies that make me cry every single time I see them, and that one I'll never fail to. And the same with Spock's death scene, because that's just cheating. But for me, I think it was when the Reliant in the immediate aftermath of the first attack, when Khan on the Reliant comes in and disables most of the Enterprise, and he at the last second Kirk comes up with this idea to take their shields down and give them a stinger, basically just to drive them off. And everybody on the bridge, I think it's Sulu, I'm pretty sure, is like, "You did it, sir," and Kirk turns around and snaps at him. Right. It's just like, "I did nothing except get caught with my britches down." And that's the first time you've ever seen Kirk admitting to really fucking something up by the numbers, and really owning it, and it's like that's a powerful moment, because like everybody's like trying to hold on to hope, and he's like, "No, we fucked up really bad, and now, guys, we're on the ropes." Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was a really intense scene for me.
And really up to that point, after that point in the film, he does everything right pretty much. Like he pretty much got britches down, britches up now. Let's get to this. And they kind of mop the floor with Khan, and they still lose Spock. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing, where he just can't create a situation to win. This is just a situation that you're not going to get out of it. That's the no-win scenario.
And then Spock gets you out of it.
Yeah, well, that Spock gets you out of it. Mm-hmm. Did you have a problem with Shatner's acting in the film? Did you think it was all right? Or I thought you said before that Khan modern? It was so great.
I mean, some of it was. I thought some of it was a little overdone, obviously, but it's Shatner, of course. Some of it was a little overdone.
Meyer said in the director's commentary that he would run the sines over and over again, do like 13, 14 takes. Generally,
until he was tired.
Yes, exactly. Because he would do things like when they're setting up the dropping the shields on the Reliant under the pretense of giving the data, and he says, "Here it comes." Like he would do like a "Here it comes," and Meyer's like, he's a super genius. He's going to understand this. So they, it was like 8 p.m. Everybody's wanting to go home, and he's finally like, "Here it comes," and like that's it. That's what I want.
That's the one I want. Yeah. No, I like that. So what you're saying is like the problems that I had with Shatner's acting in the movie is the least egregious examples on film. Okay,
sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so the moment that I would bring up is the moment where they've Spock went down and they've they were waiting for the Genesis device. They were trying to get it up on the bridge, and Kirk hadn't noticed that Spock had left. And so then, they got out of there. They just barely made it. And he's like, "Scotty, way to go. Like, you're awesome." And then somebody says, "I think you'd better come down to engineering." And that's when he looks at Spock's chair. And
that's rough.
And then he knows.
He already knows.
He knows
Yeah.
right then exactly what happened.
Yeah. It's like
that gut punch moment is a really, really strong
and
one.
it's a guilty thing too. Like
Like
his hand is caught in the cookie jar. He
Yeah.
knows that this is the cost that they had to pay to get out of this.
And
Yeah.
that's actually what got them out of there.
Yeah, that's a great moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, there's the death scene that immediately follows. And one thing that I've noticed rewatching it recently, when Kirk gets down to engineering and he's charging for the field, and McCoy holds him back, and I just realized
Scotty.
And Scotty.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it struck me that was pretty much a mirror of the scene from City on the Edge of Tomorrow, where Kirk is holding McCoy back from stopping.
Oh,
Keeler.
okay, sure.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of I'm pretty sure it wasn't intentional, but that really kind of struck me as a really cool little moment.
Yeah. You guys pick such good ones. I'll pick a dumb one. I like the Genesis sequence video when they're showing what it does. The effects are dated now, obviously, but they were state of the art back then.
Are they really?
I don't know. They look pretty good.
Computer simulation.
It looks like the inside of a Virtual Boy. It's so bad.
Well, yeah, but they were done by ILM at the time, and of course, it's a video to sell Genesis. But ILM was kind of selling their services as well. They put all of their work into this to go, "Hey, check us out," and it impressed somebody because it impressed Steve Jobs to drop $5 million to buy the computer graphics division of ILM, which became Pixar, of course. Yep. So that's how we got that. Trek really starts to find its self-referential comedy legs in the feature films, culminating in Row, Row, Row Your Boat, I guess, and Star Trek V, and then being buried forever. Tell me some of your favorite jokes or comedy bits from The Wrath of Khan. In a little segment I like to call Take My Wharf, Please. I can stretch out. I can give you one.
No, there's a scene spoken in Vulcan. One of the very few times you ever hear Vulcan actually spoken between Spock and Sarek, and it was right after. I'm sorry, not Sarek. Savick. Thank you. Anyway, spoken between Spock and Savick when Kirk has just arrived and she's met him for the first time, and he's gone through the review of all the cadets or whatnot, and then storms off, and she's just like he. Was that him really? And Spock's like, yeah, that was, yeah. She's like, he's so human. And he's like, nobody's perfect. I thought that was pretty great because you could see a legend built up around this guy, obviously, right. And then to see him in person and just it was the beginning in the movie of him just kind of getting knocked down a peg, which happened repeatedly. Actually, in fact, a lot of Star Trek II is like the big plot, the big moments that the plot hinges on is Kirk getting knocked down a peg. All the culminating in Spock's death. To make up for, to atone for and save everyone from Kirk's from the ghosts of Kirk's past. So,
a fun thing about that scene between Saavik and Spock, for anyone who doesn't know, is it was originally filmed with him speaking the lines in English. Mm-hmm. They decided in post-production to change it to Vulcan and redubbed the dialogue, but they had to come up with Vulcan language words that match the existing lip movements. So if you watch it, their lip movements exactly track with the English translation at the bottom of the screen.
That's funny.
As for comedy moments, when they're Kirk and the party are coming up to the ship for the inspection tour on the shuttle, Kirk says to Sulu, "Well, I'm glad you're going to be on board the ship for this because I don't think these kids can drive."
Yeah.
And then when they actually get ready to pull out dry dock, Spock takes a look at Kirk, not quite smirking, but you can tell he wants to smirk, and he turns to Saavik and goes, "Have you ever taken the ship out of dry dock?
Right.
You have the center chair." and then there's Kirk going,
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, he was a wreck. He was a nervous wreck.
It's like a kid backing out of the garage for the first time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Would you like a tranquilizer?
Would you like a tranquilizer?
I think the reveal that the opening scene is actually a training exercise is a pretty good sort of like fooled you kind of moment, and then everybody talking about how they handled their dramatic deaths.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, McCoy saying that's good.
"Physician, heal thyself."
Right. How's my performance? I'm not a drama critic. Apparently, they put that in because word had leaked that Spock died in the film, and so they put that in to sort of fake people out early in the film.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So was the whole Kobayashi Maru subplot like something that they added because of the leak?
I think maybe just having them sort of be the senior staff be part of the simulation and everything like that. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the thing about the whole Kobayashi Maru thing came from that movie, right? Like
Yeah, that was Seward's
because
idea.
it's such an iconic piece of Trek.
It's not even an iconic piece of Trek. You can say Kobayashi Maru to normies, and they know what you're talking about.
Right.
That is now part of the popular
Part of
culture.
popular culture, yeah.
I think my favorite comedy part, or one of them, is the elevator sequence where Kirk and Saavik are having this moment, and he's really actually trying to mentor her. And they get done, and the doors open, and Bones is like, "Who's been holding up the damn elevator?" And then in a short little piece of characterization, she walks out, and he's like, "She change her hair?" "I don't know. It's great stuff, Rami and Nail." Like, they just little blips. They speak in like this compressed sort of dialogue. We are running out of time. We really have to move on here. So let's get to our sort of final thoughts. Did you have any final thoughts or sort of parting shots about the film?
Well, not to crap all over it, but
After all this time.
but having rewatched it recently, I find that I don't feel it holds up. The whole idea that they were sending this ship out to the Ceti Alpha system, and they didn't remember that Khan was there. They didn't remember how many planets were there. They didn't remember what the qualities of those planets were. It's like, wasn't there a Class M planet in this system at one point in time?
Right.
And then I don't mind the fact. I don't mind the
It's not
fact
like
that
SETI Alpha is really super far away from us either. It's like
Right.
right over there.
Right.
and I don't mind the fact that Khan recognizes Chekhov. I will accept the fact that Chekhov was lower decks during season 1, but the fact that he didn't know anything until they get on there and he goes, Botany Bay, Botany Bay, Botany Bay.
Right.
Yeah, and the entire plot hinges on this willful forgetfulness.
There
I
must
guess
be. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I guess the gloss I'd give on that is that Kirk at the end of Space Seed didn't enter it in the logs or erased it from the logs because in fact marooning people is not standard procedure. It's not really something he should have been doing.
This is
not
still
gonna-
a charted system.
He's not going to erase a charted system from the logs.
That's
That's
But-
like SETI Alpha's what? 7 light years from us or something like that. It's right next door. But anyway.
The fact that no one noticed that there was that they were specifically investigating this planet for the purposes of using the Genesis device on it, and they didn't check. That it didn't nobody twigged to the fact that there used to be more planets in this system, and that one of them blew up. That one of them blew up, and maybe that's
and
why
in the last 15 years, there's no
years,
debris field from
Right.
the planet that just
Or
blew
energy
up.
readings or
that-
anything.
also
One
the-
planet got completely knocked out of its orbit.
the two bits, the twin bits that drove me a little crazy when I rewatched were, first of all, like everyone's dead except for these two people who are, thank goodness, alive and told us that like Khan abused us and tried to force us to betray you, but we were strong and we didn't. And oh, by the way, can we come with you? Oh yeah, sure. Like none of the maybe take 5 minutes and have the doctor check them out. Like or just say no. I'm afraid you're going to have to beam back up to the Enterprise and get treated. We can't possibly put you. I mean, that made no sense. And then 15 minutes later we have this isn't any sort of code.
Right.
At all.
Right.
No need to be concerned about the hours or no, 3 days that this will
Yeah.
take us.
Yours is superior for
I
sure.
really liked that part.
Yeah.
Those are the bits that didn't work for me.
Yeah, I mean because I actually got to see it in the theater about a year and a half ago because they were there's a pretty big theater not too far from my house that does these really cool throwback Mondays. My fiance and I got to go and see all the Indiana Jones movies on the big screen.
Awesome.
It was spectacular.
Sure.
And then before the next Star Trek movie came out, they did a couple of including Wrath of Khan. So I got to see it on the big screen for the first time, and I was delighted just because I got to see it. But the pacing is painfully slow compared to
At times, yeah.
And it just I think that it's an iconic movie amongst our generation. I don't think that it's going to be an iconic movie amongst future generations the way that, say, Star Wars probably will be for 100 years or more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, rather than come up with a criticism, I don't disagree with any of those points, but the one thought I had that there hadn't been a chance to share yet is previous to this in Star Trek, in the entire original series, and even the previous big budget film, from what we'd seen when the Enterprise is under attack, the worst thing that ever happens is the camera shakes.
Yeah.
And people rock back and forth in their seats. And to see holes being blown in the side of the ship and explosions ripping through hallways and people being hurt was shocking to see space battle depicted that way in Star Trek. And that left an impression with me for a very long time.
Yeah. At this point, we'll open up for a couple questions from the audience. We don't have a lot of time, but if anybody has any questions or comments for the panelists or about Wrath of Khan, yeah.
2 points. At the end, you all brought up the various shortcomings that you thought.
Hey, he asked for him. So.
You moderated and you all picked out shortcomings that you how could they do this? And you're right. All of that is correct. But the movie is good anyway. And I can explain all of that. You're saying, how can Starfleet not know this is going on? Starfleet is a big organization. They're a bureaucracy.
Sure.
And pointing out flaws doesn't mean that we love it, like it any less.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a whole headcanon section we usually do. We don't have time for it. But.
One small point. Patrick, you said that I should go watch the first 10 minutes of Into Darkness.
Yeah, I will stand by that to the day I die.
I'm glad to do that. But I don't need to watch the rest of it.
It's fine.
There's one con, whether he's young or old. And you know what? When the old con comes back and he's got gray hair and he's got a few wrinkles and he's still a badass.
And his
Amazing
genetically
chest.
engineered accent that he has.
Yeah, right.
So he has very small wrinkles.
Right.
Yeah, they outlawed that accent
It's
on
very
all.
is very distinct Indian Mexican accent. That
Yeah,
he
well.
has. Yeah.
It still holds together. I agree.
It's all fun to see.
Yeah, right. Jeez.
Exactly.
No, we still love the movie.
Smiles, everyone. Smile.
Well, we're almost wrapping up here, but first I want to talk My Space Dad Can Beat Up Your Space Dad. Who's your favorite captain and why? Really quick.
Janeway.
Janeway.
No.
No. I think you said, when you were on the show before, you said Picard.
I'm pretty sure I said Picard.
Yeah.
I think I'll stick by that.
Okay.
Cisco. I really, really like Cisco.
Sure.
Boy, that's tough. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Picard because he's the man for all situations. Like if it's something where he can possibly diffuse it, he will do that. If he really needs to kill you, he'll do that too, pretty damn effectively.
I'm Team Cisco.
Cisco all the way. Okay. Now that we've reached the end of the show, each of you will receive a commission thanks to your service on this special mission at the rank of full lieutenant. So you're getting an upgrade. What department on the ship would you work in?
Weapons. Yeah, just put tactical. Just put me there.
All right. Bill, do you remember what you said last time?
I said the costume department.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Are you the guy that when they call up 21st century clothing,
Right.
you're the guy
we
that's
need the undercover clothing for the desert planets.
Sure. Okay.
I'm pretty sure my self-insert characters in my high school fanfic were usually in the science department.
Oh, okay,
Can't
cool.
imagine why.
Okay.
Well, we know from the plans that they released of the original series Enterprise that somewhere on that ship there's a bowling alley. So I figure I'm the guy that gives out the rental shoes.
Nice. In the 23rd century, have they improved the spray technology, or is it the same old thing?
Oh, I think yeah, it involves transporters, but
sure.
yeah, they're really good with it now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you for joining me on the show today to talk about Star Trek and the Star Trek universe. If people want to continue the conversation, and they can, at EISTPod on Twitter and the Enterprising Individuals Facebook page, where can people find each of you online?
They can find me on Twitter at @BLeisner or on Facebook under William Leisner.
You can find me on Twitter at Naomi Kritzer or on my website, naomikritzer.com.
You can find me on Twitter at Stealthy Geek. You can find me on Facebook at Patrick S. Tomlinson, author. And you can find me at my website, www.patrickstomlinson.com. No H, TOMLINSON.
And for me, if you go to www.christopherjonesart.com, that has links to all my social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and more.
Redirects straight to porn sites. I went there before we came here.
A million porn sites.
I wasn't going to say that, but it's true, and I highly recommend them all.
I wanted to say, if you're interested in learning more about the history of Khan, author Greg Cox, a former guest of the show, has a trio of novels about the life of Khan Noonien Singh called The Eugenics Wars and To Reign in Hell, and they are extrapolations of those stories, so they're very interesting. Also, if you can't get enough of earworms, like Chekhov, head to the Cabana Room 103 for the Earworm Party. It's a room celebrating the worm creatures of classic sci-fi, but also the catchy songs you can't get out of your head. So stop by for a drink and a dance and gummy worms, I'm thinking. I mean, if they've done their homework, there's going to be gummy worms there for sure. So please check that out. Tell them Enterprising Individuals sent you. Thanks again to the panel for joining me on the show. You've been great. Thanks to the live audience here at CONvergence 2017. Give our panel a hand, please. Give yourselves a hand. Thanks again. We're signing off until the next mission. Hailing frequencies closed.
So